Good day, everyone. This is Launch Your Career. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And today we are focusing on content engineering. This is our fourth episode of over 24 different job roles that we are exploring over this series. And today I've invited a very special guest, someone that I admire so much and all the great work that you do, Megan. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you, Justin. Great to be here.
All right. Today, like I say, we're going to talk about content engineer and content engineering as a job role. This one is really near and dear to me. It's something that I consider myself a content engineer amongst other things, good things I've had a chance to be a part of in my career. It turns out that content is broad. It's part of our teaching and learning and skilling, but also part of equipping developers and engineers to really use products and use all our products. And so it's so fundamental in that. So Megan, we're going to get to know you in just a second here. But first of all, I just want to remind everyone, we have a Microsoft Reactor Code of Conduct. Please read this, but of course, be respectful, be polite, but most importantly, please share questions and comments in our chat windows. We're streaming in multiple platforms and we are available to be able to answer your questions. If we don't get it to it in this stream, we also have a second option of this episode where Megan and I are going to be online for live chat Q&A. We'll be able to focus a little bit more on that as well. So with that, yeah, Megan, let's get to know you a little bit better. Maybe I will just begin with how did you get involved in tech in the first place? Was there a magic moment or, a thing of inspiration?
Yeah, great question. And it's awesome to think back about this and just, how my career journey has been. So when I was in high school, really is when I started getting into coding.
Hmm.
I started coding at about 15. I took a Java class at my high school. There were three other people in the class, so it was a pretty small class, but it was
Hmm.
really fun for me just to get that exposure, to be able to build little programs and see the output immediately. I was so interested, I started taking another Java class at my local community college. Like I was just looking for more exposure. So pretty much from, yeah, 14, 15, I knew I wanted to be some kind of engineer, but I wasn't sure what that was. So I knew that I liked building things. I liked figuring out how things work. So from there, my interest kind of started where I would explore more options. In college, I was a computer engineer, which for my college, that was very much more hardware focused. So I did spend a lot of time actually working with circuit boards and actually putting things together and making them work, or, powering little cars to drive on a track, building my own operating system. So I got a lot of different exposure in college as well. But came back to software courses, particularly group courses, where I felt like I was actually on part of a development team. We were building real life applications, and I knew, that was what I wanted to explore further. So that I think, exposure in high school and college really put me off to a good foot. Where yeah, I pretty much have worked with software teams or around software for most of my career now.
Very cool, very cool. I didn't know about some of your background in hardware too, in computer engineering. That's very interesting. But yeah, I know you as a very versatile engineer. You joined Microsoft, I think, through GitHub as an engineering manager, if I recall right. You can do a lot of different things as an engineer. Clearly, you have
Yep.
so much different, like a range of experience, Megan. So, how did you discover content engineering and thinking about that side of it?
It's definitely been a journey, I guess, like everything else. And my going on 12-year career, I've had five different roles. So there's definitely been, options that I've explored along the way. But almost about a decade ago in 2014 is really when I got into content development, I'd say. Um, I met someone at the time who came to do a meetup at the startup that I was working at, and they were just kind of this world class traveling speaker, keynoter. And I was so inspired by them. And just I was like, wow, you just go travel around the world and you speak.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of my first exposure to really wanting to do like conference speaking. So I started with that, but I think that also then kind of kicked off me just getting into all different kind of facets of content development. So outside of speaking, I was doing more blogging, more just writing at work, different like articles or help docs. That's around the same time I got into just like videos, videos at home. I would kind of make my own like how-to videos. So
Mhm.
I really started to get into everything around the same time, more heavily on like conference speaking and just like speaking at local meetups and things like that. But yeah, about a decade ago is when it all started for me, like
Yeah.
unofficially outside of my role. And I've kind of kept it up since then. It's just evolved over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think therein lies a really interesting and core insight for, I think, perhaps for all of our learners out there that might be exploring a career in content engineering, is that, you were in an engineering profession or another job role, but you were exploring some of the more community and the content and the rich media and the video aspects of it in parallel. And I think that's really, really core, is that you can do both, or you can explore this, that there's a dimension of the
Absolutely.
technical side and the coding, but there's also the people side and the communication and the sharing and the teaching and the learning
Mhm.
side of it too. And so you don't have to be either or. You can be both and.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think how this all started for me was outside of the job that I was doing. It was really me finding something that I was interested in that aligned to my job, but finding opportunities outside of that to create content. So I don't think it was really until I came to Microsoft that I was doing that officially as part of my job as like a content creator and developer. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's definitely evolved, but really happy that this is kind of officially my focus now.
Yeah, yeah, and I can relate. I think my career evolved kind of organically towards more content engineering too. That's what I consider, myself, holistically. When we think about, being able to share and showcase knowledge, skilling, to communicate it, to share about it in a way that people understand the why it's important, as well as the how to get it done and things like that. There's a real art to it, but I think at its most kind
Absolutely.
of, yeah, fundamental level, it's the people side. It's the intersection of communication and technology, and to me, it's a complex and multifaceted career and such.
Agreed.
Awesome. Well, speaking of journeys, I just want to remind everyone out there that if you are exploring a new career as well, we've got a Cloud Skills Challenge here, Launch Your Career, of which we've added some modules that specifically focus on content engineering. How to contribute to open source on GitHub is a great core skill, for example. But if you want to explore something new or just trying things out, check that out as well, and challenge yourself to complete all the modules if you want, or just kind of focus on the ones that you care about the most as well. So, all right, well, let's keep going, Megan. So, I think one of the things as we think about content is that it is a very broad topic. Like, you can be, as a developer, you could be on docs, you can be in micro learning, you can get onto
Mhm.
YouTube. So maybe share with us a little bit more, like your thoughts about kind of the different mediums that you use as a content engineer.
So about the different mediums that I use currently in my role or just that I've used?
Sure. I think, like, let's start with currently, and then I'd love to
Okay,
kind of hear like just the different things you've tried and range and their advantages, things like
absolutely.
that.
So, um, currently as a content engineer, what I do most is written content. So that includes both docs and other training content that we have on Microsoft Learn. I
Yeah.
also do some video work. So that's probably like the second most used medium for me is some kind of like pre-recorded video. So some of our training content includes short animated videos that I can kind of help like create the content for and do the voiceovers. So that's what
Mhm.
I'm doing most of now. Previously and other roles and just I guess I'll stick to other roles.
Yeah.
What I was doing a lot of even last year, Justin, when I was on your team, was doing live streams and other pre-recorded videos. So kind of like um, um, just what do you call them? Video. Why can't I think of the word for this,
Video
Justin?
on
Video
demand or live
series,
stream?
yes,
Yeah.
or video on demand. But that was something else that I would do, series that are anywhere from like 20 to 30 videos that cover a topic, kind of for beginners, mainly getting started, but just a little bit of exposure to a topic, being able to get hands-on experience doing short demos. Those are really things that I enjoy doing. Video work for me has always been something that's been really exciting to do. So that, I mean, that's been one of my personal favorites. Um, and I think those are all the different mediums I can think of between written, pre-recorded video, live streams like this.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really like fun to experiment with the different types of mediums. And so if you're out there and you're a little nervous about like, could I imagine myself on camera someday doing maybe like what Megan, you and I are doing right now as a live stream on different social media. Like if you're a little nervous or a little uncomfortable about that, there are so many different ways to think about content engineering, from the more technical documentation to
Mhm.
more illustrative and tutorial. But the best way to do a live stream like this is just to practice, right? Um,
Absolutely. Yep.
yeah, like I'll admit that when the pandemic first happened, I had really not done a lot of on camera like this before in my career as a content engineer or developer advocate as well. In fact, I had mostly done in-person events. I had the good fortune of traveling to different universities and like maybe giving a seminar or speaking to a large group of students and things like that. But at first I was like, gosh, I don't know if I can be on camera. I don't know if I'm good enough, or will I say something wrong or something like that too. But practice really does make perfect in a sense.
Yeah, yeah. Same here, Justin. I think I was in the same boat where, I mean, yes, I had done recorded videos, which is different from being able to interact with people live pre-pandemic, and I'd done a lot of in-person speaking, so that's what I was most used to. But I think live streams when we started back in 2020 were very nerve-wracking at the time.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's nice to put yourself out there, and like you've mentioned before, it gives you a different opportunity to connect with with the community and meet people from all around the world. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's certainly worth it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I truly love about it. And I love that live streams are inclusive in the sense that anyone from around the world can have a chance to learn and to reach us and have a conversation with us. All you need is an internet connection, which is perhaps a much lower barrier to entry than traveling to a particular university or a local city or something like that too. And so, like, I appreciate that because I think it really makes a difference and such.
Same here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Megan, I recognize that like social media has its place in content engineering, or it's kind of part of it. But I think people have different perspectives on like how to utilize social media or what part of it is in the role. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts. Like, where do you use social media? Where do you perhaps not? And how has that
Hmm.
shifted, in your career?
That's a great question, and I'm probably not the best person to ask this question because I don't use social media very much. I think what I use most um, and my day to day now, and what I've used most over the years is LinkedIn. That's where I connect with a lot of different people around the world. Um, Typically I'll get questions there. People, have asked me about kind of, yeah, my career journey, work I'm doing now, work that they've seen me do. Maybe it's videos like this that I've connected with folks with, and just kind of answer some questions. Occasionally I'll meet up with people, for
Mhm.
short sessions if they want to talk more. So that's where I kind of connect the most. I used to use Twitter more, but I don't really now. So
Mhm.
I think it just depends. I feel like certainly in my role today, uh, I don't feel like I need to. I feel like in past roles, for example, like when I was a developer advocate, or, even when I was just kind of like looking to put my content out there a little bit more, particularly like these live streams that I was doing and wanted to make sure that I was sharing them. I think it was more important to be able to reach a larger community and larger
Mhm.
audience then. So I used to use it more heavily than I do now. So yeah, I don't know if I'm the
Yeah.
best person to ask. I feel like it's more important depending on the role, depending on what you're trying to share and who you're trying to reach.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that answer, and I think it's good for everyone to know that like you don't have to be a social media influencer to be a great content engineer, and indeed, like I think it has its place, and I think I kind of personally think of social media as a very personal decision, personal choice, and so there may be seasons in your career where you want to engage more on a certain platform or other ones you might de-emphasize. But it is a common question that I get that like, do I need to have 50,000 Twitter followers to become, to get into content engineering and developer advocacy and other different professions like it and such? And to which I answer no. I think I've gone back and forth with social media myself. Personally, I find right now LinkedIn is the most effective for me because I love sharing networking and careers like this show and things like that. But
Mhm.
it really kind of depends, and it depends
Right.
on the kind of content that you want to reach and such. So all that's a good bridge, I think, for us to talk a little bit about content engineering in context. For those of you who have been part of this series, you probably have seen me do a slide like this earlier. So whenever I prepare for one of these, I go to LinkedIn and really look at the jobs and think about like what is the opportunity that for all you out there that might become tomorrow's content engineers. And so first of all, content engineer, typing this into LinkedIn in the past month. So this is jobs just in the past month. Content engineer comes up in just a tad shy of 170,000 jobs just in the United States alone. And so it's really a testament to just how important documentation and communication in technology is. I even kind of scrolled through these. I'm like, are these specific to the tech industry? Is it something more broad? But like, there are just a lot of jobs out there that really have this need, and it's a big deal and something I certainly encourage you all to explore. There are different role variations, of course, of a content developer. You might hear the term technical writer or technical trainer as well. Those are kind of, in my opinion, maybe sub-disciplines of content engineering. Would you agree, Megan?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one might emphasize more like in-person delivery or a MOOC, right? A massively online course and things like that. Megan, you and I talked about developer advocacy earlier. Both of us have been developer advocates. I do think that is one way that content development can morph in that as well. And there's also promotion and more leadership opportunities. A director of programming or somebody that thinks more holistically about how sets of content come together and a managerial element of that as well. In terms of core skills here, there's lots of great stuff. Content management systems, you might use GitHub or things like that. There are education technology platforms and other things like that. But there are also just there are other just what we'll kind of call the human skills or the soft skills, the ability to storytell or be creative or to be able to speak on camera and things like that. But finally, what makes I think content engineering so unique is that you need to have some type of domain specific expertise in the product or the industry or the technology that you have. But you can kind of change that over time. I think as you learn, that's part of the like Megan, for example, like you work on a couple newer products in Azure, right? Maybe share a little bit more about those.
Yes. So currently I work on Azure Space and I also support Azure Gaming, a particular facet of Azure Gaming, which is the game developed virtual machine. But those are the two things that I focus on right now. For me and the role that I'm in within content development, I will work with different teams and different services. I think many other content developers that I know kind of like work on one service in particular. So I feel like in my whole time I've been at Microsoft, I've been like exposed to lots of different products and services. And so I feel like I have kind of like a broad range of things that I focus on versus like a particular depth, like many other people do in their role.
Yeah. I think that's what's so cool about the role, because even when we were working together more day to day, we were focusing on different topics, blockchain and Rust and other things like that. And now you're working on Azure Space. That sounds
Right.
amazing.
So it seems like things are always changing, which I think I've really come to enjoy that. To me, that seems, or what it means to me is that I'm always learning something different, which is super exciting. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, one of the common questions I have also heard from learners out there is, I don't know how to phrase it super well, but it's something to the effect of like, how technical is a content engineer? And variations of that of like, do content engineers code or do they need an engineering degree prior? Can you maybe
Mhm.
talk us through like how you think of your role with regards to the technical side of it?
Yes. So in this role, I would say that you don't need an engineering background. That's definitely not a requirement. The things that are a requirement in this type of role is writing experience. So I think that's the most important skill that you're going to see asked for across different kind of content engineering roles. Well, maybe I should say like content development or technical writing. That's definitely what you're going to see is writing experience. And I would say that's true in my role. And I think other content development roles are similar roles at Microsoft as well. I'm trying not to be too broad and this definition here. So
Yeah.
yes, at least in my role, like writing experience is kind of the biggest one. So personally for me, what that has meant is out of my roles, this is um the one that's like the least technical seeming. At least I think I really seek out those opportunities for me where I can continue to use my technical skills. And that means, multiple different things. For example, with Azure Space right now, I'm working in a whole different area that I have no exposure to. I'm no means an expert
Yeah.
in this topic, but it still allowed me to work with experts, to learn a lot from them, to take my own experience of content development and think about how to kind of best create content experiences for customers so that they can learn how to use Azure Space Services and they can get that exposure and creating interesting tutorials and videos and guides. That's kind of like where I try to create these experiences and just like showcase information in a way that's exciting. So I look for opportunities to do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes that involves, yeah, me really seeking out opportunities. Sometimes it involves me seeking out opportunities outside of just my day-to-day work. For example, like I do often find myself going back to working on Rust development, for example,
Mhm.
or doing and yeah, I think just doing things outside of like the day to day. Maybe that is going back and like updating some of the past like learned training that I've done, and building tutorials or things outside of that. So I feel like I still seek that outside of my job, even though it's maybe not as um, required now, but it definitely
Mhm.
depends. I would say this is kind of specific of my role and other similar content development roles in my org. Um, and other like more general content development roles, I've spoken to people outside of Microsoft and the jobs that they do, and it kind of differs about how technical it is exactly. But I feel like it could be kind of as technical as you make it be, or as you want it to be, basically.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I think it's very situational to the product, right? If you're writing documentation for GitHub Copilot, which for those of you who are might not aware, like that's AI generated coding, for example, then being able to use some of those core coding and engineering skills is crucial. Whereas other content development, even in software technology products, may not require as much of your of a specific technical background or things like that. You obviously, Megan,
Hmm.
you have a technical background. You've coded a lot. You've done a lot of these things in the past, but what I really hear you saying is that it's really multifaceted and it's a great entry point for people out there that are self-skilling or learning things outside of their current job role, just much similar as you might have done years ago and still are doing, like I say, with Rust and things like that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So short answer, like, no, there's not coding per se, but there's lots of other opportunities to be technical. So I think, it depends on what your specific needs are at that time. But if you're looking for something where you don't have to code on a day to day, this might be a good option.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Well, cool. Well, one of the themes of this show is to really talk about a day in the life of a content engineer in this case. And so, Megan, when you find yourself on a Monday or a Wednesday, when you're not live streaming, of course, like what are the different sort of things that you think about or do on a given day?
On a given day, for example, today after this stream, and what I like to start out my week by doing is just kind of going out and taking inventory of where things are. So for me, what that looks like is maintenance. I'm going to look if there are any customer issues that have come in about some of the different services and content that I support. I'm going to look if there are any other comments. So they could exist on GitHub, they could exist in our Learn platform, and I can show that when we do a demo a little bit later.
Hmm.
But I'm just looking if there's anything that kind of needs attention. Maintenance is an important part of our role. I'd say it's been about a day a week or so, or just at least a couple hours a week, just kind of going in and looking through my existing content and kind of making sure it's in a good state. I'm constantly updating things. So that's a little bit of probably what I'm going to do after
Hmm.
our stream today. I also support I mentioned Azure Space, so there's a couple different like sub-services within that. So I support these teams as they are having releases. So for example, I have a service that I'm working with that just had a private preview, and now we're starting to work through what the public preview is going to look
Hmm.
like. So when a service goes into public preview, that's the point where it's actually going to live on our Learn platform. So it's going to become public content for anyone to access versus now it's in a private GitHub repository. So I start to think about how we're going to organize that within our landing page and just a lot of times there it's just kind of transferring content over and again just making it public, but just thinking about where it's actually going to sit, how people are going to access it. I don't have a lot of meetings on a day to day,
Hmm. Yeah,
which
I do.
I very much appreciate. It will be, checking in with the different PMs that I work with or an engineer or so that I work with if I have a question about something or just want to sync up about where the project is, anything that I need to know. So I have those meetings occasionally, meetings with my manager, but not a lot. So it really does give me a lot of time just to like
Yeah.
focus on the content that I'm working with essentially.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
is. It strikes me as a type of role where you can really think deeply and focus on getting things done. And what I think is so interesting about what you're saying there is that it's a continuous improvement type of product. That these documents, these docs are available for whenever customers are using Azure Space or other products for the first time. And so you're constantly thinking about ways you can make it a little better. You're responding to customer feedback and
Yep.
input. There's always changes to the products and things like that to think about. But I think, as thousands, if not more than thousands, people visit these pages, this is the difference between a really high quality experience with the product or perhaps not. Like docs are everything. They're core, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think on a daily basis, I just remind myself that, this is the learning content that we have for our customers to teach them how to use our services and products. So it needs to be top tier. It needs to be
Yeah.
easy to digest. It needs to be easy to read. I think back to all of the times, over my time and development where I've gone to a docs page where I'm trying to learn how to use something and you don't come across the most friendly pages that are easy to understand. Things are out of date and how
Yeah.
frustrating that experience can be. So I really try to keep that in mind on a day-to-day and think about how we can make this information the most accessible and easy to understand and also fun. I like including fun scenarios where I can. I think that's really important, especially in some of the training content. I think in docs, maybe you want to kind of stick to the rules and stick to what people need to know, and making that as clear as possible. But if you look at some of the training modules, you can have like fun scenarios that you
Yeah.
experiment with to help the learning stick.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of themes I just heard you say there that I really think are worth touching on even more. Like the first one is the creativity and the storytelling aspect. Like
Mhm.
sometimes learning should be fun. And so, not only do you get to document APIs, but you also get to talk about real life scenarios and put the product in context. And that sounds like a lot of fun and interesting.
Exactly. It is, right? I think it's important to keep things fun. We could all use more fun.
Yeah, and then the second one I heard you say was accessibility and inclusivity. More specifically, is with documentation. Historically, it's been presented in fewer different formats, or perhaps it wasn't as fully inclusive as it might be. And so, as a content engineer, like you have that opportunity to think like about all different people that might access these
Mhm.
products, documentation, and such, which is cool.
Yeah. And yeah, that's a really good point, Justin. I think that's another aspect that I like to keep in mind. That goes back to keeping the language very clear.
Mhm.
I think we always opt for using the most like simple, straightforward explanation with like, I don't think you need to overcomplicate the words. Um, and I think that is for a couple different reasons, but one of the ones that sticks out to me most is because this is going to be translated into different languages. So
Yeah,
we want it to be as simple as possible so that those translations hopefully make the most sense. I think is important. And also, yeah, just keep it simple. I feel like that can go a long way. And just thinking about, other accessibility points and different kind of tips that I think through when creating my written content. Just, people might be using screen readers or some other kind of like assistive technology. So I try to make that language as clear as possible so that hopefully, whoever you are, you understand what's happening in this documentation.
yeah. There's so much to it. Great. Well, you mentioned the demo earlier. I think it's a good time for us to bridge to that. So, what Megan and I talked about was like, what is workflow like? And you have a background in GitHub, Megan, amongst others. And so, would you share with our learners out there a little bit more, like, what is it like to author content on the platform? How does it show up and things like
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
So
and
let me
I was just gonna say, Megan, while you're setting up too, we have a pretty quiet chat window, although we got a lot of people listening in today. So if you have a question for Megan, start thinking about that and type that into the chat window, and we'll try to answer questions later in the stream as well.
Yes, please ask questions. We are happy to answer. Okay, so it looks like my screen is up now. So I'm going to start with this landing page. I mentioned landing pages a few minutes ago, but typically all of our service documentation will live in some kind of landing page like this, where you, at an overview, can see all of the different areas that are in the documentation. So with Azure Orbital, here you can read a little bit more about the service. Essentially, it is, you can read that, so I won't state that exactly, but it allows a ground station to communicate with orbiting satellites and receive data. So we are seeing a lot of different use cases as more different companies. I feel like this used to be like very much government entities only had access to space data. I think by Azure getting involved and helping to capture space data, many other companies are finding it more I don't know, more, I guess, easily. I don't know if easy is the right word, but it's more accessible now than it's been before to be able to get data from space. So lots of different industries are getting involved in capturing this data that is stored directly in Azure. So there are really cool use cases that we're starting to see. So just a little bit more about the service that I'm actually working with. So let me kind of dive into maybe a couple of these quick starts. As we are creating content, it's important kind of to think about these different levels. So you'll have just some like overviews to learn more about the service. You'll have some quick starts that are really short guides to help you get started to do an important task with that service. So you can see a few of the different quick starts here. There are other guides and tutorials that will help you get started and set things up. So let me look at this schedule a contact quick start. And what I love about the Learn platform is that you can submit feedback right from this tool. So this feedback tool here will submit feedback directly to the Learn platform, for example. So customers use this often, and this is one of the aspects that I use to check feedback. Or there's also something at the bottom of this page where you can submit and view feedback for this product or this page. So if I were to click this page, for example, this will take me directly to GitHub. Okay, cool. I am signed in, and it will basically take me to the issues page. I'll see a template, and I have the option to enter more details here about the feedback that I want to submit. It's really nice because this feedback will come directly to our team, and we'll be able to act on your feedback. So I really appreciate this way to get feedback as well. Let me go back. And something else that I can do from this page is go and edit it directly. So if I were to edit this page, it would take me to GitHub where I'm directly at this article now, and I could edit it within here. So I am in this public Azure Docs repository where anyone can come and contribute to. There is a similar repository that is private to Microsoft employees only, which is an exact mirror of this Azure Docs site, except for when our pull requests build, we have the option to have a review environment built with that, so we can see the changes basically live in an environment very similar to the main Learn platform, but just review. So we can make a lot of changes there. So let's say I was going to make a very quick change here. I'm going to append quick start to the title. I noticed that some of the other articles had quick start before the title, so I can do that here. And I'll go ahead and add a quick message to the commit and propose changes. So anyone can go ahead and do this. I will be making the changes from my fork to the Microsoft Docs Azure Docs repository. And I can easily create a pull request here. And what will happen next is that checks will run. So it says all checks are complete. So I guess that's another thing that's a little bit different. In the private repository, there are a few more checks that run. Like we have different rules that it compares against in our publishing library, and we'll just like run a series of checks. So we can usually get a lot of messages here about things that need to be improved or changed in the repository. We get scores based on kind of like our grammar and syntax, the combination of those scores, so we can kind of see how our writing scores, for example. Oh, and that is running now. Nice. Some checks just take a little bit of time. So,
and Meg, I was just going to add to what I think is so powerful about this to connect for those of you who attended last episode about DevOps. Like, this is basically a DevOps pipeline for content that is built on GitHub. And so if you learn GitHub, Megan, like you did early in your career too, like that's one of the primary pipelines that you see is all of our Microsoft documentation here is built on GitHub. So this is available to you. You can see all of this information publicly on how we do this and how we learn and how we review content. It's really amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for calling that out, Justin. I mean, I love all the checks that run. I love all of like kind of how the build system has really grown. And I think it includes a lot of really helpful steps. So number one, like you don't have to think about them too much. You run it, and if your pull request is good, it's good. But if it, you have things to fix, it will let you know. So I really appreciate kind of like that extra step and extra just like level of security, as well as of course just needing reviewers. So the reviewer that will be assigned to this is someone on the Azure Orbital team, a PM who will come and approve the changes, or we have a whole team of reviewers who can approve the changes as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's so interesting because any time that you spend not having to do your own poly check or geographic specific checks, or to check that there's a README or a license on the open source, you don't have to spend time doing that, Megan. Instead, you can focus on the quality of your documentation and the quality of the customer experience itself. So to me, it typifies what great DevOps, what great reviewing and teamwork can or should be.
Absolutely. And we always welcome contributions. Of course. Yeah. I mean, and again, like I think for me, someone who is really customer centric, I appreciate any feedback. A lot of times, like we might just get like a good or meh or something, like single word responses. Sometimes in GitHub, we get, more specific, like, oh, you should change this. But it's also always welcome if you want to go in and make a
Yeah.
change or suggestion yourself.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So I think one of the takeaways I see in this is, if you want to get started as a content engineer, certainly GitHub is a good place to start. If you haven't taken an introduction to GitHub or seen some of the documentation we have on Microsoft Learn, I really encourage you to do that, because a lot of these doc systems are they're open source based, or they're based on GitHub in some form. Not just Microsoft's here, but other platforms that I'm aware of in the tech industry are built on similar types of infrastructure. And so a very powerful thing to begin with if you're exploring a career here and such.
And in my day to day, I also use VS Code regularly.
Hmm.
So I just demonstrated editing through the UI, which is the best way for very short changes. However, when I'm working on a large content set, more involved changes, I'm always using VS Code. So
Yeah.
VS Code, I think, is just another great tool to have in your tool set as well. And of
Yeah.
course, there's lots of great Git and GitHub integrations there.
Yeah, I love it too. I edit Markdown files quite often through VS Code, and it's just easy. It's easy for me to identify, what changes I need to make, especially if it's major changes, or I can fork a template and then use the Markdown to just make it easier to edit, and
Yes.
then push those changes right, do a pull request right from VS Code through the extension as well. So yeah, good workflow there. All right. Well, we're almost done with our time for live stream here. I really want to talk about the future. So, Megan, where do you see content engineering going in the next, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years? It's always hard to say 5 years in the tech industry. This is an ever-changing space, but where do you see us going in the role in the coming days?
Um, yes, that's a good question. And yeah, I don't know. It's hard. Basically what you just said. I think it's a little bit difficult to think about the future, but um, one thing that I want to bring up, and something that I've been thinking about, and we talked about it a couple days ago, Justin, is how AI will play more of a role in content engineering going forward. So um, I think we'll definitely see more of that. Um, Recently, within my org, we've experimented with using OpenAI to partially generate a couple articles, which I might want to show those if I can. Um, just because I don't know, I think it's interesting. They're already
Yeah, yeah,
live on our Learn platform. Now I
yeah.
have them
Go,
up
go
in the
ahead. Here,
browser.
I'll share your screen here again.
So they're up here. I'll show this one. Manage Azure resources, Azure resource groups by using Python. So you'll notice this note here that specifies this article was partially generated using Azure OpenAI. So basically, OpenAI helped to generate this, and someone with content expertise actually went in and kind of verified the information. But it's really cool that we're starting to experiment with this already. Um, I think it's certainly really cool.
Yeah. Well, and
um,
it's assistive, right? It can make you even more productive, or allow the ability to generate documentation that's perhaps a little bit more routine oriented, and that
right.
allows you to review it, but also focus on that storytelling and some of those richer learning experiences too. Is what I love,
Hmm. Exactly. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to add to Justin. That I think that this will certainly be integrated into our role a little bit more, where we have the option to generate some content using AI. This doesn't apply to everything, of course, for some of the very green content that we're working on. Um, there's not enough knowledge out there. We're going to have to be the ones to kind of supply that and write that, getting started, that really important learning material to get you off in a good foot. But I think for some of these other articles, for other maybe blogs, that we might to see more of this happening. So
Yeah.
um, I don't know what that means otherwise, maybe what that opens us up to, and maybe thinking about other types of content development or just, um, ways that we're kind of continuing to use our creativity to get that, core knowledge out there. So I don't know, but I think that's one thing that I see is that we're going to start probably using more AI in our work.
Yeah. Yeah, I also noticed that we Microsoft in this case have made a decision to very intentionally label this article as being partially generated by Azure OpenAI service, and so it's something that I'm hearing in kind of the circles of Microsoft halls, and I certainly don't. I'm not an expert, and I think it's something that we're all learning as these generative AI services become available. But one of the things I'm hearing is that labeling is so important. That it's so important for humans to know whether a given source came from an AI assistive model. Did it come directly from a human? How was it reviewed? And I think that can help produce trust in what we create and why it's important and things like that. So I think it's
Yep.
great that the content team and yourself, Megan, have thought about this and saying like, hey, this is an article, but we've also are using services that make it make it easier to generate and easier to create clear information there, as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that, Megan. So, yeah, so I think just to close out, hey, if y'all have any questions for us, please type them in the chat window. Obviously, Megan and I will also be available later to answer, or you can feel free to reach us on any of your preferred social media as well. But otherwise, to close us out, Megan, what skills would you recommend that learners out there go and acquire to become a content engineer?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. Um, I'm really just thinking about, my own career journey again, and what helped me get here was just being passionate about content development. So for me, that meant, whatever mediums are important, getting more experience with creating content, I
Mhm.
think was the most important thing that I could do. So that would be my recommendation to others out there.
Yeah,
If you like writing, right? If you like creating videos, if you like live streaming, just like go
yeah,
out and do more of that. I think it's important, as well as just to be um, technically versed or just be like familiar with what's going on. I think it's that's also important. You might have the topics and things that are already interesting to you, but I think it's always worth it to keep exploring and keep learning and
yeah,
exploring other new and interesting technology because there's a lot of things out there. So that
yeah.
can always inspire you about, other content that you want to create and just things to get involved in. So that would be my second recommendation.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Yeah, and I think what I would also add to it is just as you demoed, Megan, a lot of times these content publishing platforms are pretty transparent. And so next time you're at a docs site, rather than just look at the docs, maybe it's a really good exercise, I think, to practice like, why is the documentation the way it is? How is it organized? What types of feedback mechanisms are available? Because
Mhm.
there's a group of people like yourself that are behind that platform and are thinking every day about making that a quality and a great experience for customers. And I think that's amazing. It's a product unto itself.
Right.
And so very,
Yeah,
very cool.
that's
Yeah.
a great recommendation.
Awesome. Well, Megan, thank you again so much for joining us. Just a reminder to all of you out there, we have our Cloud Skills Challenge. If you want to learn more about some of these job skills, aka.ms/launch your career skills. And if you want to check out more episodes coming up here, we have aka MS Launch Your Career. That's our list of the different sessions that we have. So thank you. Megan, thanks again for being a guest here. Again, I'm really inspired by the content you've done, the Rust, the other things, Azure Space, Azure Orbital. You're working on so many just amazing things. So it's great getting to know you. And thank you all out there for joining us. We'll be available on live chat Q&A later today as well. In the meantime, have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all.